Welcome to Chess Box. This is a game between Wasswa Nyola and FIDE Master Okas Walter. So Nyola plays d4 and FM Okas Walter plays knight f6. Pawn c4 by far is the best move seen in this position. Knight f3. Let's see what he picks on. He plays c4 and Okas Walter is, so he goes ahead and plays g6. This brings us to the King's Indian defense. So here in this position, knight c3 by far is the best move to play in the position. Knight f3 is also a good move to play in this position. Let's see what he picks on. He chooses knight c3 and then we see pawn c5. In case of pawn takes, then knight comes to a6, which can pick back the pawn. That's why you see pawn comes forward, bishop g7, e4 and d6 from the FIDE Master. So in this position, you see that knight f3 is a good move, bishop e2 and also f4 by far putting pressure on this e5 square is also a good move. Let's see what he plays in the position. He goes ahead and plays f4 and then short castling, knight comes to f3 and it is Okas Walter to play. You have to know that knight s6 can be played in case you shouldn't get worried of the e5 push, because now the knight can still come back to g4, coming back to take the pawn, which is on e5. So I can tell you that that means there will be no work done. So he goes ahead and plays knight a6, planning to bring back the knight to be put on c7 and also go ahead and push the pawn to b5. So let's see what Wasswa Nyola assesses to play in this position. e5 is out of the question, which is a bad move. So he goes ahead and plays bishop e2. So he's planning just only to go ahead and short castle, and the game can go on very well. So it's Okas Walter. He has to justify the knight a6 move. So he plays knight c7, and you see that he's very ready to go ahead and push these two pawns so that he justifies the knight c7 move in the position. So short castling is a good move in this position. Also h3 is a good move. He has to just think accordingly to see the best move in the position. Wasswa Nyola is a national team player for Team Uganda, and he has represented Uganda in the 2024 Chess Olympiad Budapest, Hungary, and he performed very well. So he goes ahead and plays short castling, and it's Okas Walter to play his move. So he has to justify the knight c7 move. The knight on c7 has to be justified. Knight coming to d7 is also a good move. Bishop coming here to pin is also a good move. So he has to think of how to go about this position, but just know that this is round 3 of Innovation Cup and all of them are in the top 10 of the East African chess players. So he goes ahead and plays pawn b5. This is a strong move because now in case of pawn takes, then you can go ahead and sacrifice another pawn. Bishop can pick it. So Wasswa takes the pawn and he goes ahead and plays a6. Now in this position, you need to go ahead and take the pawn. For example, if you try moves like pawn e5, then pawn can take, and after pawn takes, then knight can come on g4. Look at the bishop and knight, all eyes on that. So it means there will be no work done. In case of any pushes forward, the bishop is watching the square, the knight is watching this square, so it means there is no work done. Let's go back. After a6, e5 is out of the question because black can still go on and play the game safely. Let's try to see what he has on the mind. Going ahead to push the pawn is also a good move because now that one can also try to disorganize black because he has to see where he has to put the knight. FM Walter Okas is still in his prep. We all know that he likes playing gambits, and this looks to be like the Benko gambit and the delayed Benko gambit, but it's too interesting to watch. Let's see. This game is interesting for basically people who are watching but not to the players, because it is so tough to play these games and these positions. So he picks the pawn, he takes the pawn, and bishop taking this pawn is a very good move to follow up and then develop more pieces, then bring all the rooks to these columns. I can tell you this is going to be a fighting game. So he takes the pawn and then he plays h3. So now he's stopping any knight advance jumps, and now in this position f4 should be thought of. Queen comes to c8, then bishop takes s6. These are all variations. And queen takes s6, then rook can come to e1. All those are moves to be thought of. Then knight can still come to d7, opening up for the bishop diagonal, and then king comes to h1. That is also another variation to be thought of. Wasswa Nyola Mark didn't go for that variation, so he went on and played h3. It's time to liberate the bishop. At least knight d7 is a good move to be played in the position. Queen coming to c8 is also a good move. Remember, he's now a pawn down, and he has to justify the sacrifices he made on b5 and s6. He has to justify the sacrifices because now white is a pawn up. This is his time to play. f4 mode. Okas is tactical. He's an attacking FIDE master. He likes tactics, he likes attacking, and he's very aggressive for a win. Sometimes he looks for wins like vampire looking for blood. He likes winning, and it's in his DNA that he likes the winning. But I like the way he has made his pieces on the board. You see the knight is on c7, the knight can still come back on d7, and then pawn e6 can still come in. All these are potentials. Queen can still come to. All these are good moves to play. It's just a matter of time so that he can crack the position. He's also a very strong player. So he goes ahead and plays knight d7. Now you see that the bishop has been liberated. Queen b8 can also be seen, followed by rook b8, taking control of all these columns. So it means white has to be very careful in the position. Bishop e3 is a good move. For example, in this position, moves like, for example, bishop takes, and after rook takes a6, queen can come to e1, and after queen comes to either a8 in this position, still then queen can still come to h4, trying to open so that the bishop can come in attack. Knight can still come. All those are moves which have to be thought. Let's see what he has on the mind. All these are moves which can be played. Let's see what Wasswa Nyola Mark is thinking in this position. And he goes ahead and plays, oh my god, he plays bishop e3. So Okas Walter has to be very careful. He has to get a way of liberating and taking control of this. Now there's a weakness which is on b2, which has to be attacked, and has to think of a way how to attack this weakness. So rook is out of the question. Queen can still come in, either queen b8, attacking the pawn which is on b2. Remember, the bishop has been liberated, so it's very hard to play in this position. Queen b8 is a move to be thought of. So strong move. Let's see if he can find it. So he plays queen b8, and now he's putting pressure on this pawn. So queen comes to d2, looks to be a good move, protecting that pawn, at the same time strengthening the bishop which is on e3. Let's see what Nyola plays in this game. He gets the queen, he plays queen d2. Now he's defending the pawn. So in this position, the queen can still come either to b6 or queen b4, and then the rook can still come in, putting pressure to this pawn. I told you the rooks have to be on these two columns because it's where they belong. Wasswa Nyola Mark is a national team player. He knows his things, he knows his theory, and when he's playing chess, he anticipates tactics, he anticipates disasters, and he's on the national team of Uganda. Of recent, he's the reigning champion of the Eldoret Championship, which took place in Kenya in 2025, and he won it with 6 out of 6 unbeaten. So he plays queen b4, creating space for the rook to come in to put pressure on the pawn which is on b2. So now it's time to take the bishop which is on a6. It is time to take that bishop, and then you can go ahead and also attack this queen. a3 is also a move to be thought of. All those are potential moves which can be thought of in the position. So let's see what he has to get now. In this position, even the simple bishop takes and then queen takes. Now the queen is attacking the pawn which is on e4. All those are potential. So you have to think, you have to play in the tempo, because now you know the queen is attacking the pawn which is on e4. The bishop is also willing to take the knight which is on c3. Also the bishop is also willing to take the bishop which is on s6. So he takes it, he plays bishop takes and then rook takes. So after rook takes, he has to think accordingly. How does he solve this puzzle? Because now the queen is putting an eye on the pawn which is on e4. The bishop is willing to take the knight on c3, so the queen can be able to take. So Wasswa Nyola Mark is in hot soup. He has to solve the puzzle so that he has to come up victorious. And you see the two knights on c7 and on d7 are all dormant. So for example, a3 is a good move in the position, because now black is planning to bring the rook on b8 to put pressure on b2. All these are moves. So white has to be precise in whatever he does. He has to be very precise in whatever he's doing. So it's a tough position for Wasswa Nyola Mark, and the FM is pushing so hard to see that he can grind this position, grind it move by move, so that he can get a result from this game. So he plays a3, attacking the queen. And in this position, for example, if queen b3, then rook can come to c1, and after either knight can come to b5, and I can tell you this is too much to be asked for. You can see that now after knight takes, then the bishop can still be on this pawn. This can be another variation to play. Let's go back. After a3, that variation is on the line. In this position, bishop can still take the knight which is on c3, but I believe queen b3 can be a very powerful move. Let's see what's in the mind of the FIDE master. So he plays bishop takes, and now pawn takes queen, bishop takes queen. So in this position, two pieces which can take on. For example, if bishop takes b2, then rook can come to d8, bishop c3, c takes b4, bishop d4, and then b3, and I can tell you still equal. Let's go back. In this position, bishop taking still equal. Let's see if he takes either with the knight or bishop, and if knight takes the bishop, then the knight can still have a clear outpost, which can be very interesting. So he takes the bishop with the knight takes, and now the knight is eyeing to sit on this square on each other. So he takes the pawn takes, and now he has to justify. So rook takes, rook on s6 is a good move, followed by rook coming to a1, attacking the knight which would be on s6. Remember, the knight will have captured the rook. The game is equal, and now rook takes and knight takes. So the rook has to come in and also attacking the knight, and now the knight has to find somewhere it can be. Knight can still come in, or either knight can still come in, because you can't give white a free into the black camp by the FM. So he plays knight c5, and now it is Wasswa Nyola Mark to play. Rook f5 is a good one, putting pressure on this knight and also going ahead to push the pawn on e5. Remember, the knight has a very safe square, which is knight comes to c4, which can be attacking these two squares. So knight can be attacking the two squares, and I can believe that this is being calculated by Wasswa Nyola Mark, because he's a very strong tactical player. And remember, the knight which is on c5 can't go anywhere, because it has to look at the knight to the f. So rook comes to a5 and locking the two knights, so the knights can't move anywhere. FM plays rook b8, planning to go ahead and push the pawn on b3. But here, if Wasswa Nyola Mark can be able to push the pawn which is on e5, I can tell you it is a very strong move. Remember, if pawn takes, then the pawn can still take, and now the knight which is on c5 can be a hanged piece. If pawn takes, then the bishop can win the knight. So it means knight on e5 is untouchable. Let's see if he sees it. Oh my god, he raises his hand. Is he playing f5 or he sees it? He plays pawn e5, and now in the case of pawn takes, then the bishop can take the knight which is on c5. So it means the pawn which is on e5 is untouchable. Knight is coming to c4, attacking the two weak spots, and now pawn comes to b3 is a good one. He sees it, he plays pawn b3, and now you can either take this pawn, pawn takes, and then play knight comes to c4, attacking the pawn which is on d6. All these are potential moves which can be seen in the position. So Nyola can see it as, yes, he plays pawn takes and pawn takes, and then now he plays knight comes to c4. So now he's attacking the pawn. Try to attack the bishop and see how you can go about it. On d6, so he plays Master Okas Walter. In his turn, he plays rook comes, attacking the bishop. A simple king h2 can be a good move, and after rook comes to e4, attacking the knight which is here. Bishop can take, and then after d takes, then knight d6, attacking the rook at the same time attacking the knight which is on s6, and I can tell you black can be busted. Let's go back. After rook e8, it is Wasswa Nyola to find the best move. I don't know if he has seen that variation. Remember, the knight is defending the bishop which is on e3, so all that has to be put in the mind. You have no time to take the pawn which is on d6 because the rook can just take the bishop which is on e3. So he has to think of the best way to go about this game, this win, and he's winning this game. So he plays bishop f2, and now the threat still remains. Knight still attacking the pawn which is on d6. So Walter has to do something about it. You have to go back and defend your pawn. It's the only move you have. In any other move, you will be busted. 6. Yes, he goes ahead and plays it. Plays rook d8, and now knight is supposed to take the pawn on d6, because without it, he plays it. He plays knight takes, and now fm plays. Fm needs to take that knight, because without taking that, he plays rook takes, and now the bishop has to take the knight. Bishop takes. Now you have no time to defend this. You have to take the pawn. It's the only move you have in the position, and fm knows it, so he plays rook takes, and now pinning the bishop and the rook. So he has to play rook takes, and now rook takes. So the immediate rook comes to rook. So he plays rook comes, attacking the pawn which is on b3. So he plays rook comes here to attack the pawn. So you can go ahead and sacrifice that pawn. It's the only move you have, because you have no time to defend. So pawn goes ahead to be sacrificed. Pawn takes, and now rook can take the pawn. Rook takes. So it's officially Wasswa Nyola is a pawn up. So rook comes in. So you have to see a way of cutting off this king. So he takes his time, and now he plays rook cuts off the king. Yes, he sees it. Rook cuts off the king. Rook cuts off the king, and now we can go ahead and begin pushing up on, so that we get the baby. So the baby has to be pushed, and now he plays rook comes to attack. Cutting off the king also is what he's planning to do. Then he can try to push the pawn. So Wasswa Nyola, he knows that he's winning this game. He has to just use precise advantage to win the game. If you look on the clock, he only has a few minutes compared to the FM. So he plays pawn goes to b4, and now you have to go back and sit behind this pawn just in case, leave no loose end. So he plays rook b2. So in this position, you need to go ahead and push your pawn, because now you have to put some leverage, create some pressure on the board. So he pushes it, pawn goes, and now he plays pawn forward. So he's willing to push the pawn on f3. So Wasswa plays king comes to f. So pawn comes in. He wants to liberate the king. All these are moves which have to be seen. So rook goes down, so the king comes forward, and now pawn goes forward, so the king goes to the hiding space. King hides to avoid any rook checks, so it is hiding there to avoid any rook checks. So now the pawn is pushed. Now the next is he has to go ahead and see pawn f3 is a very strong move. Pawn f3 is a very strong move in the position. These are endgame tactics. So he plays h5 first, and now Nyola plays h4. So the king can't go anywhere this side because now the rook can come in to check, and this can be losing. So he has to be there. That's a prison which they have put in the king. So he goes ahead and pushes the pawn. He plays pawn f3. So now if you take the pawn, then the king can come in, so you have to go ahead and play pawn comes forward. So he plays it. So you can't play any king moves because now the rook still come in, and this can be winning. So separate the king because he goes ahead and pushes the pawn forward. He pushes the pawn, and then now king goes to the side. Continue with the game. He sacrifices the pawn. Pawn takes, then king takes, and now it is his turn. So he plays check, checks the king. King goes back, and now checks back the king, then king goes back. So it is him supposed to play check again, then the king goes back. So it is, then he checks the king, then the king goes up. So he wants to connect the king and the pawn, so he plays rook down. Then it's Wasswa Nyola Mark who is thinking for the next move. So he plays pawn comes, king comes forward. Wasswa Mark fighting on, he needs to win this game. So he plays rook comes here, and he has to see a way of how to go about this game. The game is so interesting that every move you do costs you the whole game. So in case you try to bring the king closer to the pawn, now these rook checks are going to be too much, and now so he goes closer, he tries it, king comes, and then now the rook comes in instantly with check, and the king goes away, then the rook still goes back. So but you have to fight on. So Wasswa plays king goes to e7, and now if king goes to e7, he plays king goes, the rook comes back, and now if you try to play king f8, doesn't work, so he tries out. So he plays, he sacrifices the pawn, then now, and now he's planning to bring the king to attack. Yes, he plays it. He plays king comes here. So he's trying to see how he can try to take that pawn. So the only move he has, he plays rook comes to d8, and now he takes the pawn. Now he plays b4. So in case you go away or you go down, then this will be rook can take the pawn. So it means you don't have time to win this game. So he plays rook comes to, and then they decide to accept to draw because now